You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. Man, do I have a good conversation for you this week. I sat down with Dr. Nerina Ramlakhan, the author of Finding Inner Safety, the Key to Healing, Thriving, and Overcoming Inner Burnout. And we talk all about stress and trauma, and how all the stress and trauma, both big and small, that we experience in our lives, and to be clear, you don't have to come from a war-torn country to experience trauma, really bubble up during menopause and wreak havoc on our well-being. And we've covered this topic before on the show, but this is the first time we really define trauma and stress. And Nerina has some really great advice for bringing your nervous system back to a place where you feel safe and maybe even joyful. And this is hard-earned wisdom on her part. She's not only educated in neurophysiology, she has lived what she writes. Her father was terribly abusive during her childhood. She attempted suicide 3 times by her mid-30s. She suffered an eating disorder until age 34. She spent a month in a psychiatric clinic after a breakdown. She has lost family members tragically. She has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And she's also a really high-achieving woman athletically and professionally. She completed 7 marathons and over 40 triathlons, which she would later realize that feeling unsafe drove her to achieve and win and get shit done. So during this conversation, you'll just hear a woman who has been through it and has found true inner peace and safety. Nerina is a renowned physiologist and sleep expert with over 25 years of experience in helping people and organizations thrive by using her blend of physiology, psychology, philosophy, professional and personal insights so they can create profound shifts in awareness and consciousness. Her passion is for people to live more peaceful, vital, and fulfilling lives in chaotic times. You can learn more about her and her work at drnerina.com. I'll put a hot link of that in the show notes. And I just really love this conversation, and I hope you do as well. All right, before we get to it, quick reminder that I'm taking voicemails to do a Q&A episode down the road. So you can leave any questions you'd like answered at speakpipe.com/hitplay. I will leave a clickable link to that in the show notes as well. Remember to sign up for my free weekly blog at feistymenopause.com, where I distill all the latest research and going on and menopause and what it means for you. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at feistymenopause.com. Come join our private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group. I have an email. If you have ideas or feedback, you can hit me up at hitplaynotpause@livefeisty.com. And a quick thanks to That's It Fruit Bars. I have been loving them on my long rides and my runs. They are simply dried fruit, which I love, with probiotics, which is great for my belly. And they provide long-lasting energy that I need to keep going as these sessions for the 70.3 Ironman get longer and longer. So thank you, That's It, for keeping the support of the show going. All right, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. Okay, well, Dr. Nerina, I'm super excited to have you here with us today. And before we hit record, you shared with me what you did as a little morning ritual, which I would love for you to, now that I've hit record, share with our audience.
Okay, let's go in on this one then. I went down to the river. I live 200 meters or so away, a few hundred meters away from the River Thames. And at the moment, we've got some really extreme weather in the UK. For us, it's really cold. And so the river was about 0.5 degrees centigrade. And I went down with a couple of friends and my rescue dog. And in my swimsuit, I get into the river. I have some neoprene socks and some neoprene gloves for my fingers. But I swim throughout the year in the river. I have been doing for 4 years. And I just got in for 5 minutes and I did this thing called swooshing because the current in the river is so strong at the moment. So you can't really swim. Um, so I go upstream to this point where there's this tree and I sort of gingerly get into the water and it's cold. It's really cold. It's like getting into liquid fire. And then you swoosh down because the current carries you really really fast downstream. And then I get off at a certain point, but it's just, I feel great. I feel so great right now. So that was 3 hours ago. I did that.
And that is not necessarily a Wim Hof sort of practice, but something that you have just taken to doing for yourself, for like
Yeah.
anti-inflammatory purposes, for mood boosting. Like, what is the?
I do it. Well, I've done a Wim Hof workshop years ago, probably
Mm,
about 6 years ago. But my family come from the Caribbean. I don't really do cold. I would be the person walking around the house with a hot water bottle in my underwear. But then I discovered during the pandemic in particular, I found myself in a really dark place.
mm.
And I started going down to the river, and people would walk past and they would say things like, "Aren't you worried? Aren't you worried about sewage? Aren't you afraid? Aren't you worried that you'll drown?" And that changed into, "Wow, are you enjoying that?" to, "Can I join you?" And so I made river friends. And it was as a result, one of these river friends that I came across your podcast, actually. Denise Yates, a really good friend of mine, who's now a friend for life. But then I started to discover that my mood was so much better and that my body didn't ache, because I'm coming through menopause. I'd noticed that my joints felt fantastic. I felt amazingly sharp afterwards, and I was writing my fourth book. So I noticed that I would come back, and in the afternoon, I wouldn't have that slump. I would just be feeling great. And so I'm very balanced with it. This morning was only 5 minutes in there. And in fact, it was too cold for me to put my head in. Normally, I swim with my head in, but the temperatures in the UK have plummeted so quickly that I haven't fully been able to acclimatize to putting my head in. So I was just in up to my neck with a bubble hat, with a bubble hat.
I love that. I love that. You make me want to live on a cold river. But yeah, that's a lovely morning ritual. And I'm glad that your river friend pointed you to our direction and that you're here with us today.
Absolutely. It was a gift. It's a gift to be here today as well. Thank
Is
you.
is the fourth book this one, Finding Inner Safety? The key to healing,
Yes.
thriving, and overcoming burnout that we'll be talking about today?
It is. That's my fourth book. That came out on my birthday last year, purely by chance, serendipitously. The publisher, my lovely publishers, said, "How about the 7th of April?" I was like, "Wow, spooky. Yes, yes, please. That's my birthday. That's
Wow,
good."
that's nice. That is
Yeah.
actually really nice. So we
Mm.
have done two shows previously on trauma, one with a physician who is well versed in adverse childhood experiences, and another with a woman who was a victim of many adverse childhood experiences, who's an ultra runner. Um, and it's quite clear that it can profoundly impact the menopausal experience. And I really liked the quote in your book. You're like, "We sleep when we feel safe," because I thought that really dovetailed into this conversation. You clearly know trauma, and I would love to dive into this topic because I don't think that I've ever really, really defined that term. Many people like myself, when we think of trauma, we think war-torn countries, right? Or maybe like
Mhm.
yourself, like a victim of some sort of domestic violence or other violence. But what, if you were to define trauma, how would you define it for our audience?
Oh God, let's start with an easy question then. Yeah, I mean,
That's what I'm good at.
being a neurophysiologist, I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD in neurophysiology. I think of trauma in terms in many different ways, but I think of it in terms of the impact on the nervous system.
Mm.
And I'm also known as a sleep expert. And I say I'm known as is because I don't necessarily, I don't like labels, but I came to be labeled as a sleep expert. And for the last 25 years, I have watched the impact of life, the speed of life on the nervous system. And once, in the early part of my career, I was measuring I was measuring what was happening in people's nervous systems. So this is when I started getting interested in trauma, because trauma is that onslaught. It is that that the force that lands, I'm making this up as I'm speaking now, right? That lands in the nervous system, that forces us to live out of alignment with our natural state of balance and happiness and joy. That's just my today
Mhm.
definition of it. It causes us to live from the wrong part of our nervous system, meaning in survival mode. And we're meant to go into survival mode sometimes, but we're not meant to live from there all the time. And so the impact of trauma and the weight of life and adverse events and past events, not necessarily even in your own life, can impact on your physiology and your nervous system such that you end up habituating to living in the wrong part of your nervous system without even realizing it. And this is what I see as being trauma. And this is what I have experienced personally as trauma.
So if we're going to talk about how that intersects, with menopause, I get a lot of letters and notes from readers. And, the one I got a request for this kind of topic because the reader wrote, I think a podcast devoted to how we carry trauma memory and traumatic experiences in our body gut would be a wonderful conversation. She says, not only do we see the heart gut brain axis in regard to physical health, there's a connection between gut memory and emotions that's important. And she also referenced the body keeps score, which I know that is something
Yeah.
that you reference in your book too. I
Yes.
I don't feel women have traditionally felt safe during menopause. Their bodies are changing. They feel like society is looking at them differently. Can this new societal milieu and this new hormonal milieu bring up all these adverse things that have happened in our past? Like, what is happening to us during this time?
Yeah. I think that we are part of, we are not, we're not separate. We're not separate from everything else that's
Hmm.
happening around us. Everything around us impacts on us. And when I was working in that health screening laboratory 25 years ago, and it was in London Square Mile, and I was measuring the health of corporate employees. And this is when I started to notice that human beings, weren't behaving in the way that I'd anticipated they would behave based on my academic research. So the blood pressure was high, the breathing patterns were strange, the ECG, when they got on the exercise bike and we were looking at spirometry and oxygen saturation, everything was behaving in a way that was telling me this animal is stressed. Why? Why is it behaving as if it's in survival, running in the sympathetic nervous system? So I started paying attention to the world, noticing that, of course, everything was speeding up because of technology and mobile phones and emails and the World Wide Web. So external world, external milieu is affecting internal. And then when you go into the menopause, it's a time where the nervous system becomes even more nervous, if I can put it that way.
You can.
Yeah, the nervous system becomes more nervous, and it's almost like everything that's happened up until now, this is where you're going to deal with it. Now it's time to deal with it. And I do say, I have an 18-year-old daughter, and she talks to me about premenstrual syndrome and her periods. And whenever she's ready to listen to me, which is not that often at the moment, she'll, I'll try and impart a bit of wisdom. But I do say, you know, darling, I know that you're getting period pains. I know you're feeling down, but all of this is training for when you go through your menopause. I think every period is training. And when we become in tune and aligned with the cycles and the rhythms of our femaleness, stands us in better stead when you go into the menopause, because you're free falling then. You don't have the period, you don't have those ovulation pains, you don't have that. I used to kind of almost enjoy that temperature change that would happen around ovulation. I'd go, oh, this is happening to my body right now, right now. So you had these demarcations in this intelligent physiological cycle. And then you're kind of free falling when you go into menopause, but the nervous system is vibrating. This is the way I feel it. And everything that you've dealt that hasn't been dealt with kind of comes up then. And we feel it as as heat or angst or emotional waves or rage or whatever it's going to be, how it shows up for you and how it's shown up for me. And the interesting thing is that, I talk about this in my book, and, inherited ancestral trauma in it, and I cite Bruce Lipton's work on epigenetics And, I had trauma in my life. I talk about this a bit in the book, and I talk about my adverse childhood experience and my ACE score. But, my ancestors were extreme, went through huge trauma. They were indentured slaves. There was a lot of domestic violence, a lot of incest, alcoholism. And I think I have this hypothesis that you can land in a generation where there is resource. I have more resource than my mother had. She had more resource than her mother had. And the more resource, the more surplus of resource we have, the greater the capacity to then heal what's gone before.
Hmm.
But it can show up in menopause. And that's flipping tough.
Yes, yes, that is that reader that also sent the recommendation for the show said, like, she described it as like 4 years of absolute hell, like anxiety, depression, loss of mojo. She quit her dissertation, almost quit her marriage. I mean, I hear this a lot. And they go to, she went to a doctor who was just like, when was your last period and are you having hot flashes? I mean, it was like no addressing all this other stuff. So where does a woman even start?
Well, this may not be the absolute place to start, but the way I like to help women to start is to help them sleep.
Mm.
Being a sleep expert, and I see many women, and I've worked for 10 years in psychiatry. Ironically, the psychiatric clinic where I was once a patient years ago when I was sectioned. I had a breakdown and I was sectioned. So I've been on a journey of finding tools and resources for over 25 years. And out of that came this gem of being able to help people to sleep. And I had terrible issues with insomnia as well. And when people come to see me, and women in particular, if I can get them sleeping well, there's a sort of magic that starts to take place. The body starts to find a resource for healing, including healing trauma, including healing, just being able to cope with everyday life and those swings and those rages and the heat. And you may still have it, but it's not as extreme. So there's a reason, I believe, why nature has intelligently designed us to spend a third of our lives sleeping. And if I can help my clients and patients to get that sleep and not just get 8 hours, I try to get them to think beyond just getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep. I try to help them think about, I call it sattvic in Hindi. There's a word called sattvic, which means pure. And I try to help them to get a certain type of sleep. And then I start to see this magic taking place where they suddenly have more resource. And that resource might lead them to say, I've got to leave this marriage, or I've got to get some therapy, or I've got to leave this job, or go and speak to my manager. They suddenly find the energy to deal with the thing that's exacerbating the menopausal symptoms, if that makes sense. But they need the energy to do that. And once they're sleeping well, that helps them to find the resource and the courage to do the work. I call it the real work. If you don't do the real work and you stay in that marriage, and I've done it, my second marriage ended during my menopause. There was a lot of loss, a lot of loss and grief. But if you don't do the work, it's almost as if that rage implodes, it goes in, and the
Yeah.
symptoms are worse.
So I mean, that's a hefty topic. Sleep is a hefty topic, especially in the menopausal space, because so, I hear from women who are like, I will do anything. It's been years,
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you begin?
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to share my 5 non-negotiables?
Do
Would
it.
that help? So
Yeah.
I came across, as a result of all these years of helping people, including extreme problems in psychiatry as well. And I discovered that time and again, I was saying these 5 things, these 5 things, these 5 things, somewhat bullishly, like, and it came about because I was working with a group of traders in an investment bank, and they were like giving me hell, and they were drinking, and this was decades ago. So they were, the rules weren't really, and health and safety wasn't,
Hmm.
employers' duty of care wasn't quite what it is now. And I was taking virtually any kind of work because I was at the start of my career. So I turn up to work with these bankers. They're giving me a hard time. And then I said, look, if you want to get better sleep, and I don't care whether you do or not, because I'm still going to get paid well for this, but you want to do these 5 things and they're non-negotiable. And then that births the 5 non-negotiables, but they're still relevant. They're very relevant in menopause, okay? So the first one is eating breakfast. It's related to nutrition, and it's eating within 30 to 45 minutes of rising in the morning, eating breakfast and making sure it's nutrient rich, making sure that in that breakfast, you've got your protein, you've got your fat, you've got your carbohydrate. And I know that there will be women listening to your podcast who probably practice intermittent fasting and things like that. But what I'm going to say is that intermittent fasting is great for the right person, the right physiological setup. But if you're having menopausal symptoms, you're having difficulty getting to sleep or staying asleep, waking up, not feeling restored, waking up with hot flushes, you need to reset your nervous system. You need to tell your blood sugar level first thing in the morning that you're safe. You need to tell your body you're safe. You're not living in famine. Eat within
Thank
30.
you.
Yes.
I want to broadcast that into the sky, but thank you for saying that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's really important. And a lot of women will say they can't eat, it makes them feel sick. I will have a cup of tea or coffee first. So that's the second thing. Don't use caffeine as a substitute for food. So my caffeine habit is a spiritual practice. My cup of tea, my mug, the way I make it, but it's after I've had big food. I've had usually a second breakfast. I have one breakfast, walk the dog, come back, second breakfast, that's eggs. That's what I've pumped this up as a result of working with Julie as well, Julie Angel. So it's really nutrient rich. And then I have my cup of tea and I think, oh, this is actually what I prefer more than anything in the world. But don't have the caffeine until you've eaten. Third thing, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. So actually before I even eat, there's hydration happening. And my mix is a third coconut water, hot water, pinch of trace minerals, put that fluid back in, especially if you're getting hot sweats, especially if you're restless at night and your body temperature's all over the place, you'll be losing fluid. And to sleep well, to detoxify the brain, to get that amazing sattvic sleep, your body needs to be well hydrated, especially if you're going to be training hard as well. So hydrate. And everyone's got different fluid intake requirements, depending on exercise, all that kind of stuff. But for me, it's around 2.5 liters. Fourth one, cultivate a healthier relationship with going to bed. Ideally, you want to be going to bed around 9:30, 10. You don't need to be fast asleep, but you could be reading something relaxing and life-affirming and uplifting, something not traumatic, maybe not even reading my 4th book before you go to bed, something relaxing, something that makes you go to bed thinking the world is a good place. So preparing yourself to slide into that first stage, I mean, I used to run marathons, but when you start running and you warm up and you get into your stride and then you do your best run ever. So you don't go out hard. But a lot of people go out hard with sleep. They delay going to bed. They go to bed after midnight, then they hit the sack and they think, right, I need to sleep now. And that's the equivalent of going off too fast.
That's a great analogy.
Slide into it. And that 90 minutes before midnight is so important for setting up the rhythm of how you're going to sleep throughout the night and just setting you up for restful sleep and clean sleep. And then the 5th one, which links into number 4, though, is technology. Cultivate a healthier relationship with technology. Get your phone out of the bedroom, get an old-fashioned alarm clock. Don't check the time during the night. It's normal to wake up during the night. So those are the 5 things. Technology. Take breaks from technology during the day. So I experiment in the morning. My phone is out the bedroom, switched off in another part of the house. I wake up and I go, right, how long before I feel this compulsion to switch my phone on? Because I'm as addicted as the next person. But let me start inside before I go out. And I think menopause invites us to go in more. We have to listen really, really deeply because you're not getting the periods, you're not getting the ovulation pains, you're not getting those obvious markers of where you are in your cycle. So you have to learn to listen really deeply. And I have to tell you, the joke is I was experimenting with the 5 a.m. club last week. Robin Sharma's book, The 5 a.m. Club. Get up at 5, do 20 minutes of this, do 20 minutes of that. And by day 4 or 5, I was deranged. I mean, this is life in the living laboratory of Nerina, but day 4 or 5, I was actually weeping with a friend on the phone. I was like, I'm so tired. Because I can get quite dramatic when I'm tired. But I was like, I was not listening. Are you not listening to yourself, Nerina? This is the phase of life where I used to find waking up at 5 really easy. And I'd be out on my bike, we'd be training for an Ironman. 5:45, we're meeting by the end of the road, we're out hitting the hills for a 100K bike ride. I don't want to do that anymore. My body doesn't want that. You know, I wake up and I feel like a queen in my bedroom. And it's soft. Let me just listen for a bit. And I think it does, that's the way it's shown up for me in a lot of my clients, is there's a softness and a gentleness that is required at the start of the day in order to hear, what is it that I need? What do I need to eat today? Wow, I think I need those trace minerals today. I may need that afternoon nap, or I think at some point today, I'm going to need to cry. And I've got really good at crying. I have no shame about crying now. Cry more, you'll probably get less hot flushes. Don't go down the toxic positivity route of it's all great. Do gratitude practice, but it has its place. Allow space for what needs to be felt. Otherwise, it's going to bite you in the butt, in the night with those hot flushes.
It's so interesting that you articulate that so well. It could be, I'm going into the third year of this show, and woven through the episodes, this has come up where, because we have you've done Ironman, you've done marathon, where like women would be like, I always just sprung up at 5 and was out the door, and they're just not there, and they're frustrated and they're forcing themselves. And many people have said, maybe just rearrange it a bit and give yourself some of that time in the morning. And it's interesting to hear you really dive in and articulate that, because it's a theme that has come up a lot.
Totally. And, I listen in and I go, do you know what? Today, no river swim. Or I'm not sure about river swim today. I'm just not sure. I don't know whether my nervous system, because when you go in there, I mean, I've got a wearable and it shows,
Meditation.
yeah, when you got in that river, your sympathetic nervous system was like, it was right up there. But and it's not just about listening to the data that my wearable has given me. It's like listening. How do I feel? Actually, I feel really great. And an hour later, I switch my phone on, and the data goes, "Wow, whatever you did with sleep last night, that was brilliant." Have some fun today. And I think, yeah, that's true. But one of the reasons I went swimming this morning, I went into the water, is because my friend had her 60th birthday on Saturday. And I danced my ass off. Sorry, am I allowed to say that? But
You are indeed, yes.
I just let rip. It was all the stuff that I grew up with, and hip hop and all this. There was twerking, there was slut drops, there was a whole lot. And the next morning, I was like bent over trying to get to the bathroom. I mean, my back was really sore. My joints were a bit sore. And I was like, okay, I should have stretched after the 3-hour drive to get there. I mean, sorry, this is not very inspiring for your listeners, but it's like, okay, I want to do this stuff, but radical self-care. I need to look after myself. And it didn't take long. There was a bit of stretching, 5 minutes of stretching, hot shower, really hot shower, followed by a minute of cold. Body felt good, you know? And then I saw a lot of the women who'd been to the party as well, and they said they got back, after the party, and all took anti-inflammatory tablets. And I was like, a painkiller? I don't want to do that. I don't want to take painkillers so I can go dancing. But what I do want to do is know what I need to do in order to be able to continue doing the things I love doing. Because I still climb, and everyone I climb with is at least 10, 20 years younger than me. So I need to take good care of myself, radical self-care. And a big part of that is strong resting, as Julie would say, Julie Angel,
Mm.
strong resting.
Can you
Mm.
define strong resting for the audience?
Strong resting, right. So it goes beyond what happens when you get into bed at night and sleep. And I think everyone has to discover their route to strong resting. And Julie would have so much to say about this. And I am learning that for me, it means not even talking. That for me, it means closing my mouth, breathing through my nose. It means sitting or even lying on the floor. I spend a lot of time lying on the floor. I was working this morning at my computer, kneeling on a bolster, and sometimes for me, rest is movement. It's the most restful thing after staring at a screen or presenting to a group of people. sometimes the most restful thing is to get out and dance with friends, because I've been in seclusion all week working and in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, for me, I've done a TEDx on this called Come to Work and Rest. And it's about building recovery into your day every 90 minutes or so, in tune with the ultradian rhythm, which is the hum of your energy, which lies in this the 24-hour clock. So every 90 minutes, if you, again, this listening deeply, if you listen, what does my body want right now? Oh, it's feeling a bit tired. And I might be thinking about a cup of coffee. Is it really coffee that it wants? I'm thinking about chocolate. Is it really chocolate? Maybe it's just sit down, close your eyes. Maybe it's lying on the floor with your legs up the wall. Close your eyes. Maybe right now resting for me means go play with my dog. Lie on the floor and play with the dog, or go stroke the cat. I have animals, so it helps, So strong resting is building recovery into your day in a meaningful and creative way that enables you to gather energy either on a physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual level. you know so when I was driving back from my friend's party yesterday, 3 hours in the car, I thought, what's the most restful thing that I can do? Well, I can hydrate, I can eat my snacks, and I can switch my phone off, because I know that I'm going to want to speak to people, because I may get bored. But no, I'm going to put some music on and I'm going to sing. So I did a lot of singing in the car, probably quite badly, and that I came home feeling very energized. So yeah, I that's a long-winded way of defining strong resting.
It's a
Uh,
good way, though. I mean, I didn't expect it to be so multifaceted, but that makes sense. And I find fatigue takes many forms, right? I mean, it's your central nervous system, it's your legs, it's depending what you're doing, but how you
yeah,
need to rest, all of that might look a little different.
it might do. And the breathing thing, because I've become a great fan of the work of the Oxygen Advantage,
Mm-hmm.
Patrick McEwen's work. And I bought his book years ago, and it was sitting on one of my shelves, just collecting dust, until Julie reminded me about the Oxygen Advantage, and reading and breathing through my nose, keeping my mouth closed, because I was very Wim Hof. And there's a place for that as well, but I was really into those extreme breath techniques and releasing the trauma. And, if it wasn't a big cathartic snot fest, it wasn't doing anything. And then I just started to realize, actually, there's always going to be stuff to heal. It's always going to be there. How can I gently, softly allow myself to heal and to rebalance my nervous system? So I've discovered that less is more with the breathing. So I find that very restful, to just lie on the floor, just do 4 or 5 minutes of box breathing, maybe
Can
some.
you define box breathing?
Um, well, the one that my teenager has actually said, Mom, I don't listen to much of what you say, but I'm loving the box breathing for my panic attacks. And that was a great compliment. So she breathing. So if you imagine a box and you're breathing in, so again, ideally mouth closed, through the nose, breathing in for 4, hold for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold for four
Mm.
counts. And there are different variations on the timing. There's a 4-4-6-2 that I sometimes do. So you're breathing in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 2 seconds. And recently I've started doing more things like Tai Chi and Qigong, where the principle of breathe, but don't hear your breath. Make it soft. You shouldn't be able to hear it, but it's deep. And that's very different. So we went to the river, and one of my friends, who I'm helping him with his breathing because he's got some hypertension issues. I've been coaching him a bit on breathing, and he was in the river and he was going, and I was like, okay, Rick, maybe just this is the place to practice not hearing your breathing. It's really soft. And you can go deep, but don't hear it. And so it brings in a whole, and I find this to be very powerful during menopause and during those hot flushes, when you feel that wave coming. And in the same way with my teenager, listen, when you start to feel that premenstrual wave coming, or those period pains, or the panic, the anxiety coming. Soft and gentle. You don't hear it, you know? So, yeah, the breathing is great. I'm still learning about strong resting, though, Celine. Can I just say I'm not an expert? I haven't been physically ill. I say not physically. I haven't been physically ill since October 2019. To my knowledge, I haven't had COVID or anything like this, you know. When I get ill physically, I'm not great at knowing A, that I'm ill, and B, that I need to rest and what that might look like. When people say to me they've spent the whole day in bed, I'm like, wow, really? How do you do that? You know, so I'm still a work in progress. You know, restlessness has been my best friend for many years, for most of my life. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
A lot of it was the trauma of but I had it from the moment of my birth. My mom said, you know, you were born on the trolley as they were wheeling me into the theater. You kind of like blasted your way into the world, and then you just wouldn't sleep. So as a baby, and continued until my 30s. So there's an agitation and unease, that trauma. That's how it shows up for me. It shows up in different ways for other people. For me, it shows up in a can't sit still, have to do this before I can sit still, have to do that before I can sit still, have to do, you know? So like even a Netflix film, you know, I'll sit there and it could take me the best part of a day to watch a 2-hour film. And then I start to notice this and breathe my way through the agitation.
Yeah, I wonder if like part of that, and it's common, is that like the demons won't catch me if I keep moving.
Yeah, yeah. And I've got a lot better. So I've done a shared load. And I listened to your podcast, your interview with Athena.
Yes, that's the one I
Yeah.
was referencing earlier.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of work on myself, you know, from, well, having been sectioned in the psychiatric unit for a month in my 30s, to years of psychoanalytic psychotherapy, to cognitive behavioral therapy, to somatic experiencing, coaching with NLP modalities, RTT hypnotherapy. I've even done psychedelic journeying. I personally use a lot of spiritual practice. I use a lot of prayer, meditation, my form of meditation and contemplation. And it's got me to the point in my life where I'm now able to sit with the agitation a lot of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time I'm able to go, what's going on right now? Can I just be? And I have a favorite chair that I sit in, my red velvet chair. My friends know about my red velvet chair, and I sit there sometimes with my cup of Darjeeling tea, and I try and be with it, you know, and um, it's a work in progress, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I what I'm hearing through all of this, the non-negotiables, the sleep, the breathing, is that these are all roads to help the nervous system be less nervous. I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, let's helping the nervous system become more nervous, because what happens when the nervous system is not nervous? It feels safe.
Right.
You know, we sleep when we feel safe, but we don't just sleep when we feel safe. As I have been discovering since publishing my fourth book, Finding Inner Safety, something strange has been happening, Celine, in that I've noticed that when my nervous system isn't nervous, something else starts to bubble up, which is an unfurling of sensations of happiness and joy, and a bubbling up of just feeling good for no particular reason other than I just feel good in my skin.
Mm.
And I haven't had this for most of my life. And I have to say, so far, I mean, it's early days this year, 2023, but a lot of my year so far has been quite joyful for no particular reason. I used to hate Christmas. I used to dread it. You know, I've lost members of my family. My sister died very traumatically. I was heartbroken. My daughter left during the pandemic. There were things. There's been loss. There's been grief. But I've suddenly broken through to a place, and look, it's going to be up and down. That's the journey of growth, isn't it? But right now, I'm discovering that the safer I feel and the more settled my nervous system is, and the more prepared I am to sit with the agitation, go through it, go through those moments, cry if I need to. And when I come out the other side, there is an emergence of something which I'm calling joy. And this may well be the subject of my 5th book. And I have to actually write this down on my lucky stone, and it says unashamedly joyful. Because when I first started experiencing this weird sensation called joy, like, what the hell? I'm not allowed to have this. There are people around me suffering, there's war. There are people starving. There are terrible things happening in the world. People are dying. A lot of my best friends, their parents are dying. People younger than that are dying. How can I have, and my daughter sometimes is struggling, how can I have joy? My elderly mother is suffering. She has Alzheimer's. How can I have joy? And I had to write it down and go, you're allowed to have this. You're allowed, and we are allowed to have this. And this is what happens. This is the reward. And so I was very keen to come on your podcast because I feel that there is hope. And I do see the menopause, and trust me, there's been a lot of crying. There's been a lot of dark moments. During the pandemic, I went back to a place that I'd been in my 30s where I felt suicidal. I've done the overdoses. I've been in hospital having the stomach pumped out, in my 30s and in my teens. I never thought I'd go there again. And during the pandemic, the combination of loneliness, grief, trauma, menopause, trying to write a book on trauma while living it myself, it was almost, and I was supporting hundreds of thousands of people. My work went through the roof. So there was vicarious trauma as well, not my own, but collective. It all landed. And I went back into that place of feeling so bad that I actually sat there one day with my rescue dog in front of me going, if I take these pills, who's gonna know? Who's gonna be there for this dog and the cat? Cat will be okay, but the dog. How would I do this logistically? I was in a very dark place. And that was less than 2 years ago. But I had a lot of tools. And I reached out to friends. And that's the other thing. Deep support, not just support, deep. Who can you laugh with? Who can you cry with? Who's genuinely there for you? Who's going to hold space for you if you really need to cry? Like that snot fest, not kind of cover it up and let's find the positive in this. I know my beliefs are such that I believe all of this is a gift, including the trauma. But I cannot spiritually bypass in the moment what my body is experiencing when the trauma comes up and I'm feeling it in my solar plexus, in my chest, in my body. I cannot spiritually bypass it with a gratitude practice. I need to cry that out. And if I'm scared to do it on my own, I need to reach out. And I started reaching out to people. So I have learned how to make friends. I didn't have many friends, growing up. I don't have friends from school, and I now have 2 friends from university who I've reconnected with. But I wasn't very good at making friends. I was very much in my head, very much an intellectual. And then even when I was doing a lot of sport, it was my sporting buddies. And, a week after my sister died, none of my triathlon friends really knew what was happening. I turned up to track and I trained hard. I did 10 400s, I trained for a half Iron, my first half Ironman. As soon as she died, I went into hard training. And so all of this came back during the pandemic because it hadn't been resolved. And I needed deep support and deep connection. And I'm learning how to do that. I'm learning how to allow friendship. And that's been amazing. And real, genuine, authentic friendship, which can sometimes look quite ugly.
Is there a place that you found these friends?
Well, some of it happened down by the river. Denise Yates, the wonderful woman who introduced me to your podcast, she started coming down from North London to swim in the river because the place where she used to swim close to her was closed. So I met her. And then there were some existing friendships where I started showing myself more and trusting to do that. And so the party I went to at the weekend, they're from university, and they're but dear friends who I never trusted. I never thought I was good enough to be their friends. They're both eminent professors, one a gynecologist, an IVF specialist, and the other one's a professor in cancer research at Imperial College. I never thought I was as good as them. So I never showed up if I wasn't feeling great. And then I started showing up when I wasn't feeling great and then saying, I'm actually not feeling great. I need you guys to see that I'm not feeling great. And sometimes I was quite feisty with it because they had never seen me like that. So that it took being very honest. I also met friends by just walking my dog, making more eye contact. I started asking friends if we could speak on the phone rather than just texting.
Mm.
And as a result, realized that there were some friends who would never be those close friends because they didn't want to do more than text messages or voice messages. They weren't the ones who would do the phone calls or let's meet up. And so I started building a sort of network around me of people who are different types of friendships for different modes. And then I have my buddies who I climb with, who might not be the ones I cry with, but they serve a different one. And the ones I might dance with, and then there are ones who span all the different areas. But I think having two or three friends that you can really cry with and really laugh with, and the network is growing all the time, you know, as I trust and I allow.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. You know, as you're talking, I wonder also what your thoughts are on the hormonal drive of a lot of this. You know, we hear a lot of women. You have done Ironman. You keep referencing climbing. You rock climb now. Is that what?
Yes, I do. Although I
Yeah.
haven't been outdoors for a couple of few years now, but so a lot of it is indoors. But I also,
Mm,
uh, you know, do a bit of children's playgrounds, just climb stuff. I climb trees. During the pandemic, I was up very high as well. So a little bit of parkour-esque type
oh,
stuff.
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, a lot of times I hear women, and they'll say, you know, they've been very motivated. They've had a lot of mojo. They've been training.
Mm.
Everything's great. And then sort of on a dime, like it's gone. Like it feels like it's evaporated into space and they don't, one woman's like, I went out for a run and she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she,
Mm.
is a lot of times the answer is posited as a hormonal therapy route. But I'm curious on your thoughts of managing that space when it comes up.
Yeah. So I've had my journey with that, and I'm currently not running. I have an injury in my
Mm.
left knee, and I'm paying attention to it. So I haven't really been able to run much for the last 2 years, and I have to be honest, I miss running a lot, and I don't want to be able to run. I don't want to do marathons anymore. I don't even want to measure my running. I don't want to time anything, but I love the freedom of just putting. I mean, walking doesn't really do it for me.
I hear you. I
Oh,
understand.
I just like it's just like doesn't suit my physiology. I grew up watching my father run, and it feels like it's in my DNA. So I miss the running, and looking back on it, I was really blowing up in my perimenopause. I wasn't eating properly, but I was just pushing through, and I was doing sub 4 hour marathons, which was decent. My last one was when I was 46, 3:45
Good
in
marathon.
Barcelona. Yeah, it was a good marathon, but I was getting night sweats and stuff like that. I didn't even realize what was happening to me, and I wasn't eating properly, and wasn't eating I wasn't getting the right protein and fat. I was, um, and so I'm now not able to run really because this knee thing is, and so it's a work in progress. I'm working with Julie. I'm doing a lot of strength stuff. I'm doing a lot of kettlebells, doing a lot of 360-degree movement to wake up the muscles that support the knee, working on the hip and stuff like that. And I'm holding out hope that I'll be able to go back to running. But there's also in there, again, that deep listening where I started to realize that I didn't miss it as much as I thought I would, because I didn't really want to do what I used to do. I think I was running away from life
Mm.
rather than running towards life. And so I'm just wondering, and this is just my journey. I mean, I have a friend who's the same age of me as me in her late 50s, who's done about 150 marathons, and she can do, I think she's done like a marathon every day over the weekends type scenarios. But there's a lot of trauma that has never been dealt with, and it's her thing. And so I think you have to find your journey, and you have to find your way with it. And you do need every trick in the book, that radical self-care. I take hormone replacement. I take body
Okay.
identical hormones, right? And for a while I thought, do I need to be ashamed of this? And then I thought, no, I'm going to do it. And in fact, I was speaking to my Chinese medicine practitioner, and he was sticking the needles in, and he was doing the Chinese herbs. And I said, John, I'm thinking about the hormone replacement because, and he goes, there's so much going on in your life. And at the time I was traveling a lot, I think the week after that I'd done Hong Kong and back in 3 days, delivering programs with an investment bank and running leadership programs and stuff. And I was like, he goes, you need every trick in the book. You're dealing with grief. Your daughter is going through a really tough time. Your marriage has ended. You're right. You're working on I think I was working on my third book at that time. And you still want to do the things that used to be able to, you still want to climb and cycle and run and do all of that stuff. You need to resource that. So we need to reach out for resource. We need to supplement, and I was listening to your podcast, and I was listening to something about joint support. So I messaged my nutritionist, holistic nutritionist. I said, can you tell me a bit about, do I need to be taking more joint? I think it was Prevenix.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one.
Yeah.
Okay, because I can see it's a US supplement. So I messaged a few friends. What are you guys doing for joint support? So it's got a constant listening and I feel like my body's changing a little bit again. Do I need to bring in more support? What does that look like? What's that going to? So it is an inquiry, and we also need to think about affordability. What can we afford?
How did the hormone therapy, what was the catalyst? Like, what were you experiencing that made you say, I'm thinking about going down this route? And then how did it help?
Yeah, I started feeling untethered, like emotional and just like really swings, massive swings.
Hmm.
And, back in 1995, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but I'm not medicated for bipolar. They diagnosed complex PTSD. I'm not medicated. I take no medication for mental health, such. Um, but those swings started becoming more extreme, and I was noticing motivation was low, hot, flashes and hot sweats. And it was, being with a teenager and watching her struggling and noticing that we were a unit. And if I was feeling bad, she was going to feel bad. It felt unforgiving rather.
Right.
And I just thought, I need more support. I'm getting the acupuncture every few weeks randomly. I'm taking my Chinese herbs. I'd always pushed through everything, including Ironman and marathons and stuff. I used to show up and not eat breakfast for a marathon, just eat what was on the route. I think Athena said the same. I used to do that. I did a lot of Paris marathons, just had a croissant and then ran a marathon. And then maybe took an energy gel with some caffeine in it, mile 18. But then I just realized I just couldn't do it. And that if I wanted to continue doing the things I loved, and the dancing, I dance a lot, I needed that extra help. And I wanted to feel juicy and attractive and sexy. I wanted all of that. And so I found that when I started taking it, this is just my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I started, you know, regaining some of those things that I wanted. And I don't believe that, some of these women said at the party, if you want to dance like this, you at the end of the day, you got to take a couple of anti-inflammatory tablets. Hell no. I would rather be called mad getting in the river, you
Yeah.
know? So I have a tub of water in my garden, which is at frozen solid at the moment. But hopefully, as the temperatures when they start to rise, so I'll get in that. If I can't get down to the river, but that's my medication as well. And on those days where that dark cloud comes in, it doesn't necessarily need them. Everything that I take, all the resourcing helps, but it still happens. I still have
Yeah.
days like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you share that too, because in some circles, I feel like hormone therapy is getting um, a little too glorified as a panacea, and people get on it, and it's just like it's not really meant to be a panacea. So, I mean, I have not taken it, I have it's just not been my journey, and I haven't felt the need, um, but it is not a panacea for sure. You have to do all this other work that you're doing.
You do, and I don't think there's any way of getting around it. I think that if you don't do the work, it shows up, and unfortunately I'm seeing this with some of my friends around me who are not necessarily doing the work, and it's showing up physically with all sorts of ailments, and I'm watching, one of my best friends who would climb with me, cycle with me, now is not able to climb, now is not able to cycle, and that's when the joy starts to go, and we can't. And I don't climb like I used to climb. I don't even know if I'm going to be climbing outdoors anymore. I don't know,
Mhm.
but I'm keeping an open mind, and in the meantime I'm climbing indoors, and I'm still bouldering, and I'm still sometimes jumping off the bouldering wall, but being careful and making sure that everything's strong so that I fall well, And the training with Julie helps as well, that 300, because even though I considered myself to be very fit when I started training with her last year, there were certain things I couldn't do. And I thought, what the hell?
It's eye-opening.
Yeah, this is really annoying. I can do all sorts of things. Why can't I do that? That's a really simple thing you're doing, and I can't do that. So I treat it as an adventure. It's an
Yeah.
adventure. Hmm.
So is there anything that we haven't covered, and we've covered a lot of beautiful ground here. Is there anything that we have not covered that before we close the conversation, that you think audience would benefit from, or that you would like to share with our audience?
I think I'd like to share a message of hope,
Thank you.
a message of hope that this can be a hopeful time. This can be a joyful time, but you do have to do the work. And sometimes doing the work means, you go party with your friends at the weekend, but you're not going to drink. They think you're drinking, but you're not really, because I want to feel great the next day. I mean, I'm going to have one glass of wine or something, and that might be my version of, doing the work. I can't necessarily do what I used to do and get away with it. But I think it's a hopeful and joyful time. And I also think there's something in this. There's a gem in the menopause, and this came out last year when I was invited to speak at the Women's Climbing Symposium in England, in Exeter. And we had, what's her name? Abby Dion, who's the only Black woman in New York from New York who climbed Everest. And we had Gilly MacArthur, she's an ice swimmer and climber who broke her back and came back from that. And I know that Gilly, she's in the menopausal age range as well. But they invited me to go there and speak, and I'm like, but you've got all of these Olympic climbers and all these young women and hot women going, and they go, no, you're one of our elders. You're one of the wise elders. And I was like, you know what? I like that. And I think that there is a wisdom. There is a wisdom that comes through in the menopause. And it's a very internal space. It takes you into a very internal space. And don't be afraid to go there. Don't be afraid to go there, because you don't only meet a few demons, but there's gems in there. And then you can come out and share those gems. And I take that into my corporate work. I mean, I can be positively fierce if I need to. I can go into the big top four management consultancies and be as fierce as I couldn't be in my 30s and 40s, but I can be now. And menopause has given me that.
This is going to sound like a very strange question, but do you need to slay the dragons to get the gems, or can you just sit down with the dragons in quiet and maybe just slide a gem into your hand? You know, I mean, just I actually feel like I am better at like just sitting with the dragon, where I always felt like I had to slay the dragon. I'm better with being like, hey dragon, longtime friend of mine, mind if I have a seat?
And what would slaying the dragons look like for you, Celine? What did that used to look like?
I'm very goal oriented, so I would feel like I need to resolve this thing. I need an answer. Like I
Yeah.
need to get it out of my head, right? I need to get rid of it. I need to exercise it, whatever it might be. But like and many people in endurance sports are oriented this way. I'm like, I'm just going to run to the sun, you know, and the dragon will not catch me. But at some point, you've got to sit down and recover more. And it's like, hey, the dragon's still there. But I don't mind the dragon as much. Like, and that's just been my journey. Like, I'm like, okay, we coexist, dragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think sitting with the dragon is great, you know, and I sit in my red chair and I sit with the dragon and I contemplate my dragon. Or first thing in the morning, I like to do this practice where before I open my eyes, I just listen to my head. I go, ah, shit, that's what's going on today. And you know, if I could run, I would be running this morning, but I can't run right now. And walking is not going to slay this particular dragon. So this is going to call for something else. And there's now I've got much better at gently sitting with it. And sometimes that process does take longer, you know, and I'm not even convinced that sometimes slaying with the running used to work for me. Or maybe it just numbed, stuffed it in deeper
You
and
tired
numbed
the
it
dragon out a little bit. Yeah, I got
up,
him deeper in.
just shut it up for a while. But yeah, this gentleness and this sitting with it is really quite it's quite beautiful, and asking questions. Okay, wow, so this is going. I wonder how this is going to play out today. What is this asking of me today? And I do a lot of I wonder. I wonder how this is, you know, rather than I hope this feeling goes. Hmm, I wonder. I wonder where this feeling is taking me today. I wonder what this feeling wants. And I have names for some of my dragons. I have a Miss Trunchbull, and I have a neurotic, just from because for predictive text sometimes puts me in as instead of Nerina, it says neurona or neurotic. So I thought, yeah, there's definitely one of those as well. So I have different names for them. So sometimes I go, Miss Trunchbull, you really don't want me to write today. You're really unhappy about me sitting down to write. You're really giving me a hard time about the thought of going in to speak to that management consultancy with all those guys. So what are you really afraid of? What can I give you? Let's sit with this. And so I don't tell her to F off, you know, or try and run till she shuts up, which I can't do. But yeah. So I think that's what you mean. Yeah. Sitting gently, softly. Yeah.
And to bring this full circle, that brings down that sympathetic activity too, instead of being like, shit, the dragon is here again, and just like ramping it up, just being like, hello, Jeroma. Like, I see you're here
Absolutely.
again.
And it enables that, what we call in, you know, trauma, in the trauma world, safety science world, it enables the pendulation between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic, and then just dancing between the two and just noticing where you are on that, and just noticing, okay, I just need to sit gently now. And, you know, like even last night, coming back from a weekend of revelry and wonderful conversations and beautiful connections, just sitting with the dragon of loneliness that popped up. Here I am. Here I am. That's okay. And I can be with this, you know, and it moves quite quickly these days, you know, most of the time. As long as I look after my energy, you know, if I get myself overtired, that dragon's raging at me for a while, you know.
Right. That's which comes back to our 5 non-negotiables to keep yourself in a good space.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know, can I just say to people that those 5 things are, you do them for 7 to 10 days, and you will start to notice the difference to your energy. And you might notice the difference to your energy before you notice the difference to your sleep. You might notice that you may not have slept so well. You had a couple of hot flashes, but you wake up feeling better. Some of you more energized. You suddenly feel, and then you go to bed not feeling so anxious about going to bed, and sleep isn't the enemy anymore. So practice it for 7 to 10 days. Breakfast, caffeine, hydration, get to bed earlier, technology out the bedroom, more breaks from technology during the day. Then notice how your nervous system starts to pendulate in a more softly. It's not doing that, or up and
Yeah.
down, it's softer. It's soft. Okay. And then you can bring in deeper tools. Then you can bring in the gratitude practice. I'm doing a bit more breathing, because some of my clients, when they come to see me, we can't touch breathing in the first session. Nervous system's too nervous. So we do 5 non-negotiable. Second session, we go in deeper. Then we do the gentle breathing. Feel the exhale going out of the body. Breathe out roots. Feel the breathing in the belly, keeping the mouth closed. Soft, soft. You can't hear it. Then they're ready to go there. But in the first session, no.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a process. And I thank you for coming and sharing the first steps of that process and your own process with us, because it's meaningful when somebody has been through it and is going through it.
Yeah, it's an inside out. It's an inside out job, and the work is never done until you're done. That's my belief.
Yeah.
When I take my last breath, then I've done my work. But I can't sit here thinking, I've done it. I'm there now, Who knows what's waiting around the corner? But what I do know is that I'm showing up every day. I'm committed to doing the work. When I get a bit unconscious sometimes and I'm slipping up by the wayside, I gently bring myself back in again. Go, okay, that didn't quite work. What are we going to do differently now? It's a beautiful journey.
Well, that's our show. Join me next week when I sit down with Annabelle Broadbent. Annabelle is a pathogenic microbiologist by profession, and she is also a self-described elite vegan athlete, a commercial fashion model, a creative artist, a photographer, a horsewoman, a certified equine massage therapist, a cyclist, a skateboarder, and a yogini. And she is also a really kick-ass runner who has amassed 15 Puerto Rico national records as a masters runner in 4 different age groups in 7 different distances. And last year, at age 55, was awarded the 2022 USATF Gold Fidipides Award for Excellence in Long Distance Running. We talk about how she's navigated menopause and training and a whole lot more. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.